Welcome. Thank you guys for coming. It's just really nice to see so many students and friends and colleagues. My name is Jeremy. I'm an associate professor in the English department here at Hunter College. It's great to be back at the Roosevelt House. You guys did this amazing Audre Lorde conference, and we had a departmental retreat here once. So I just wanted to, before we begin, thank President Raab, Maha Haroon in the President's Office, Speeder Sclafani, and the staff for the Roosevelt House. They really helped me to situate logistics for this event, and my dean, Andy Polsky, for encouraging me to ask for such help. I want to extend gratitude to our distinguished guests, what some of you might call an OG, my comrade Slavoj Žižek, for volunteering.
Like O.J. Simpson?
No, OG, G.
Oh, yeah, G.
Yeah, not OG Simpson, okay. Anyway, I wanted to thank Slavoj for volunteering this afternoon. We did this once at BMCC a few years ago, and now it's Hunter's turn. It's a real mark of his generosity to volunteer so much to the CUNY communities. My classes this term, who are in somewhere around, we've been reading Slavoj's version of Antigone, a text that, according to Žižek, quote, doesn't present to be a work of art, but an ethico-political exercise.
My text, not
your
Antigone.
text, yeah. And so we'll be having some sort of political ethico exercise this afternoon, and we're very excited for it. We also, this semester, have been looking at Žižek's take on Akira Kurosawa's Hamlet film, The Glad Sleep Well. Tonight, however, as you know, our focus is on the crises of our current political moment. At the end, if there's time, I have a few questions for Slavoj, and then we'll open it up to student queries. So this will be brief. It's only one more paragraph. Walter Benjamin, stealing the conceptual goods away from Carl Schmitt, famously reminds us that, quote, the tradition of the oppressed teach us that the state of emergency in which we live is not the exception but the rule. Today's historical impasse is one heck of an exception and rule. The atavistic right branch of the ruling class answers the aggressive unmoorings and deprivations of capital with xenophobia, stochastic terrorism, conspiracy theory, what Žižek's friend Frederick Jameson calls the poor man's cognitive mapping, and a cynical disavowal of history that purposely confuses naming with the very systemic oppression that name refers to, as well as the ruthless and paranoid dehumanization of LGBT folk and recently stripping half the country of bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. Meanwhile, the other side, in bad faith, finally have come around to the fact that the Electoral College wasn't a swell idea. I submit that the bourgeoisie in the United States of America should be forced to submit and read and write very long dissertations on W.B. Boyce's Black Reconstruction in America, which has something to say about that topic. What Žižek calls the liberal elite runs rhetorical hamster wheels to exclude from their imperative evocation of fascism its structural, economic, jingoistic, and capitalist component. Anything but name the structural roots of the problem. Slavoj's scholarship is so vast. A short but very incomplete list includes his commentaries on cybernetics, Frederick Schelling's philosophy, a positively brilliant small branch on psychoanalysis, Wagner, and opera, his work on sexuality in the void, new global economic, ecological, and medical fissures for struggle, the Kol Nidre prayer as a lens to think about Antigone, Jane Austen and Edith Wharton novels, Hegelian dialectics as a framework to think about various liberation struggles, Bjork on film, and for me personally, and most influentially, his brilliant readings of Robespierre and Lenin that confront soberly and rigorously their theoretical work and radical praxis. Neither, or rather always neither reductive nor romantic, Žižek reads revolutions from within and not from without. James Baldwin, in his last text, succinctly writes in The Evidence of Things Not Seen, quote, the present social and political apparatus cannot serve human need, end quote. Against such a disheartening impasse, Žižek's work makes room. It opens up a clearing. It plants down some potatoes and carrots, suggesting new possibilities. It's my pleasure to welcome him to Roosevelt House and Hunter College.
Thanks very much. I'm really glad and sorry, I hope this works. I'm really glad and proud to be here. Let me just begin by improvising just a little bit as a reply to you. You know, it's very interesting how we met. I think that, no, not physically, but spiritually. I think that it was that you gave me wrote your book on Haiti, Toussaint Louverture, and so on, which I always, you see, this is how my trouble politically. I know we in West are Eurocentric, imperialists, and so on, but unfortunately, I don't believe in this simplistic idea that bad Eurocentrism, let's rely on some local traditions as a resistance to Western. For example, some of my friends in Brazil claim that they know a tribe deep in Amazonia who maybe offers the model for how to organize life today. No, I think that the task is still to bring what is the best in European tradition, Enlightenment and so on, but to read it through third world experiences. That's the only way to achieve actual universality. And as I wrote, and I was delighted by your book along these lines, you know that I claim that without Haiti revolution, French Revolution would have been basically a local French event. It's only through repetition in Haiti that French Revolution really became a global event. Now, some anti-European critics claim, but you see, you are always Eurocentrist, as if the only way for us in Latin America, Africa, is nonetheless to repeat Europe. And here I introduced in a short text on this the term dislocation. It's not simply applying European notions. What was meant with equality and so on was substantially changed in Haiti revolution. And if there is, I think you also report on it, but I read books on it, isn't this the most beautiful collaboration in the sense of fraternity, common struggle? You know the story of Haiti. Jacobins, all the glory to them. They immediately fully recognized Toussaint Louverture, the new Haiti regime. Then Napoleon came. He turned the tide completely. He sent his army there, trying to recapture Haiti, and Napoleon was very brutal here. He even wrote that it went so far that it's not enough just to reintroduce slavery. All the slaves there, Quebec, has to be killed and new slaves brought from Africa. And it's incredible. You know the story. The Black Army won over the French army. It's incredible. But you know who, and they were absolutely respected all the time in Haiti. It's a beautiful story. I hope you know it. You know who was one of the key factors there in the Black victory? Napoleon sent a strong part of his army were Polish soldiers. And when the White Army was approaching the Black Army, they heard some strange songs. And they thought, oh, they're probably singing some stupid tribal songs or whatever. When they came close, they heard the Black Army was singing Marseillaise, and they did something heroic. The Polish soldiers say, wait a minute, aren't we here on the wrong side? And they changed sides, and even when afterwards, after Toussaint Louverture's death, Haiti guys went too far and ordered the killing of all white people. They exempted the Polish people. And are you aware, sorry to remind you of this, what price Haiti paid to be allowed in early 1820s, to be allowed to be included again into world economy? Haiti had to pay to France basically for their own freedom, what France lost them. And we are not talking about some 1-2%. You know that most of the 19th century, Haiti had to give to France as a financial punishment 60 to 80% of their entire state budget. This was kind of a symbolic punishment. You went too far, you did your revolution when you shouldn't have done it. Now comes another beautiful shock. You will say, yeah, 19th century. You know when Haiti paid the last installment to France? 1946, even after, so like the West wanted to make it absolutely sure that this will be a failure. So when people talk about universal values, multiculturalism, true universality, this is the case. So I cannot wait what you will bring out now. Just another reaction to you, when you mentioned the mess today, no? We are in such a crazy predicament, like just to give you one point that I often repeat. As most of you probably, even in as your beloved President ex-Trump would have said, shithole of a country, Slovenia. We watched the 6th of January last year, what happens there, and many of my leftist friends were crying. You know why? Because the scene is the realization of their dream. My God, the crowd is occupying the seat of power. But then they cry, but we should have been doing this. That's the problem today. You know, we are in a deep mess. And what I will try to do is just to, I'm sorry if it will be a little bit boring, I run out of my dirty jokes. In Q&A, you can ask me, but then you will be responsible for what you get. You know, like, tell us enough of theory, tell me some dirty joke. No, I will try to be more. Okay, let me begin. Maybe you know this, my latest discovery. I even didn't know what this is. You know what is Kopi Luwak? It's the world's most expensive coffee. It is literally made from poop. From coffee beans that are partially digested and then pooped out by a civet, a cat-like creature that lives in Southeast Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. Civets' digestive enzymes change the structure of proteins in the coffee beans, which removes some of the acidity to make a smoother cup of coffee. My point is that, if I may begin with this slightly obscene metaphor, that today's new right populist ideology is a kind of ideological Kopi Luwak. Old ideas, some of them even respectable, like the critique of financial elites exploiting ordinary people, are processed by today's right-wing apes and turned into shit. I will give you a concrete example. Out of my utter perversity, you should do it to see what's the problem today. I listen sometimes to what's War Room or what the title, this is super. Yeah. I was even invited, I'm not so crazy, to go to his. No, that's too much for me. And I remember listening to some of his podcasts that, you know, that they begin in an almost leftist way. He attacks big companies, blah, blah, blah. And then comes after the first 20 minutes, then comes the populist turn. But to go to the end, was the noblest liberal democratic ideology often also not processed by our civets to legitimize global capitalist exploitation and humanitarian military intervention? We are all in this shit, not only up to our knees, but, if I'm allowed to use my last tasteless metaphor, up to our asses. The world is really getting crazy today, in the sense that, you know what's my fear? I repeated the last day, always this point. I'm sorry if this offends some of you, I'm pro-Ukrainian, but how the ideology of Putin's Russia echoes today's right-wing populism in the West. First, they all focus on these new forms of sexuality, LGBT plus, gay rights, whatever, abortion. They focus on this as the ultimate root of our troubles. Don't underestimate this. This is, you cannot say these are just words, really there are economic interests and so on. For example, do you know what happened a week ago in Russia? Patriarch Kirill, the boss of Russian Orthodox Church, gave a new title on Putin, which is the chief exorcist. And they officially, in Kremlin now, redefined the goal of intervention in Ukraine as, they claim it's no longer to say denazification, now it's de-satanization. They claim that Ukraine is just the edge of what goes in Western Europe. Satan is in power there. It's much worse or even nonetheless similar to your American populists. So what I fear, sorry, from my narrow European interests is in the elections you have now, this Tuesday, and then 2 years from now, you know, if Trump or Trumpists win, I think that they will definitely make a kind of a deal with all the new fundamentalists, Putin and so on, and it will be the nightmare of a new world. So, what went wrong? Now comes, I'm sorry, a little bit the boring part. As Peter Sloterdijk, the German philosopher who is not exactly a left-winger, but he's not an idiot, I like him, he pointed out that at the very mythic, of course, beginning of European civilization, there is Homer's Iliad, which, as you probably know, opens with the lines on wrath, rage. Like one translation, rage goddess, seeing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous doomed, that had cost the Achaeans countless losses and so on. So at the beginning it's rage. And today, at the end, rage is returning forcefully. How? Now comes, I'm sorry, the boring part. And I mean it seriously, this is not a rhetorical offer. If at any point you find something not clearly formulated and so on, you are sincerely invited to interrupt me, like, could you please just clarify this and so on. It's not, why I'm saying it's not just a formal offer, because I wrote long texts on it. I think if you ask me what is the zero level of civilization, it's precisely this kind of a pure rhetorics when you offer something without expecting that the other guy will accept your offer. Like, do you have it also here? In Europe, we have, I love it, because in my evil mind, I often exploit it just to embarrass my friends. You know, like, let's say, but it's not true. I have more money than my friend, I invite him to dinner. Then when the bill comes, it's clear to both of us that I will pay. But we have these good manners that the other guy should insist for a minute or what, let us split or and then we play this game, but we both know that my friend made an offer to be rejected. Now, you can already guess with my primordial Balkan evil what I like to do. I say as a rule, okay, if you want, you pay. And then this is a catastrophe, of course, you know, because the guy then says, oh my God, I forgot my credit card. We have to go through all this stuff, no? Now, you will say this is an extreme case. It's not. Is this not? It's not even totalitarian. The basic form of, let's call it ideological identification. To accept that something that you are obliged to do, at the same time, you are I'll put it like this, sorry, I try not to get lost. The pure formula is you are given a free choice on condition that you make the right choice, you know. So I will not get lost into it. I will just say that we, in the last 100 years, maybe less, in the West, and I don't mean it in an ironic way. Listen, to annoy many of my leftist friends, I say that till now, European Union was a kind of a miracle. I will tell you something very pathetic. Yeah, there was still colonialism, up and down racism, but I don't think there was an epoch in the entire history of humanity where such a large number of population lived in such a relative welfare, freedom, safety than in Western Europe, basically social democratic welfare state. And here I will again quote Sloterdijk, a conservative who introduced a wonderful distinction between objective and subjective social democracy. The guy in whose house we are sitting now, he was, although this wasn't called like that, he was in some sense let's cut the long story short. He was the closest the United States came to some kind of social democracy. But what we got in Europe, but now it's being gradually dismantled, also in the United States, it's what Sloterdijk calls objective social democracy, which means the basic social democratic values, the idea that society, state had to provide for free education, healthcare, and so on, which is simply, how should I put it, part of the basic social pact. Even it gains an independence towards, with regard to elections. Like I remember, this was beautiful. In Sweden, there was in the 60s, before the golden age of social democracy. Then, I don't know where, late 60s, early 70s, Palme's party, Olof Palme's social democracy lost, and some liberal, moderately conservative, their opponents, other side, gained power. We were all afraid, oh my God, will they dismantle? No, they went in nationalization even further. So this is the true triumph, that ultimately it's not even important who wins, because elections, because basic social democratic values are already part of the basic social pact. This is being put under threat today. How? In his interpretation of the fall of East European communism, Jürgen Habermas proved to be, I think, the ultimate left Fukuyamaist, referring to, you know, Fukuyama, the end of history, and so on and so on. Habermas silently accepts that the existing liberal democratic order is the best one possible, and that while we should strive to make it more just, we should not challenge its basic premises. This is why he welcomed, when communism fell apart in late 80s, early 90s, Habermas welcomed precisely what many leftists saw as the big deficiency of the anti-communist protests in Eastern Europe. The fact that these protests were not motivated by any new vision of a post-communist future, these protests, kind of pseudo-revolutions, where they were just, Habermas calls them like this, rectifying or catch-up revolutions, in German Nachholende. Their aim was just to enable those society to gain what the Western Europeans already possessed. And the ongoing wave of protests in Western Europe itself tend to question this very basic liberal democratic frame. You remember the yellow vests, Gilets jaunes in France, Podemos, other protests in Spain, and so on. They are definitely not just catch-up movements. They embody the weird reversal that characterizes today's global situation. The old antagonism between ordinary people and financial capitalist elites is back with a vengeance, with ordinary people erupting in protest against the elites. However, what is new is that the populist right has proved to be much more adept in channeling this rage in the direction, in its own direction, much more adept than the left. Alain Badiou was justified to say apropos the French protests, it's a nice French phrase, tout ce qui bouge n'est pas rouge. All that moves, makes unrest, is not red. There can be also movement coming from the other side. So what I remember my first perception of this. I remember, I think it was in 2005, maybe I'm wrong, sorry, the last elections won by Tony Blair, Labour Party in England. I remember I was by chance giving some classes in London, and I saw, quite by chance, I almost don't watch TV, some kind of a popular show where people were electing the most unpopular person in England. Tony Blair won by the most hated person. What is so sad? 2 weeks after, in elections, Tony Blair won. So obviously, this gap is very dangerous. We have some level of basic popular discontent, and it is impossible to translate it, to transpose it into the existing party political, however you call it, frame. It was the same, I'm not here lost in details, this is, I think, a very dangerous phenomenon. It was the same, I don't really remember when did this happen, some 3 years ago, Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests in France. Tremendous movement and so on. Then Macron did something that an honest liberal should do. He invited them to negotiations and so on, and it was very tragic to listen to it. They simply couldn't find points of agreement, like they didn't speak the same language. But I don't put, now the thing to avoid here is the populist solution, claiming, yes, Macron stood for the alienated state machinery. He wasn't able to really listen to the people. But it's much more complex, because if you look at what the protesters demanded, it was a strange, inconsistent mixture of very pragmatic popular demands, like lower the price of gasoline and so on, all that stuff, and up to racist demands, less immigrants. Many working people in France experience immigrants as unfair competition. And there is some truth in it, which is why, remember, this is crucial, that when Bush the Younger, I think was president, it was he, not a democratic president, who gave, I think, citizenship to 2 million of illegal Mexican, Latin American, and so on, for obvious reasons. The idea is, in this way, there will be, the working class will have less influence, more competition, and so on and so on. I think that this is the gap we are all experiencing today. And our societies here with you, but also in Europe, are dangerously approaching a kind of a, let's call it, new civil war. For the time being, it's not yet armed conflict, but it's getting close to that. For example, look at what is happening at your place. Democracy, the way we know it, is characterized by two things. Not only the voice of the majority, blah, blah, but also, and I like this aspect, is crucial for a functioning democracy, unconditional proceduralism. You know, You can say the elections were manipulated, blah, blah, but once the numbers are here, all sides accept them. Like, you remember Al Gore versus, it was Bush, I think, no? Bush. You remember how it was probably manipulated, all those, what was it, 400 votes in Florida. But nonetheless, when the final verdict came, all sides accepted it. Now, this game is over. Do you know that I think some 60-70% of your Republican Party members think that Biden is not a legal president? And so on. This is extremely dangerous, this idea, and this is typically how you, without being directly revolutionary, conservative revolutionary, you manipulate mechanisms. Like, you know, you have this minor proposal which was never used, subdivision of a law, how we call it, that here in the States, if the situation of elections in a state is not clear, blah, blah, then in an extreme case, the Congress of a state, one of the state, can directly nominate electoral blah, blah, blah. But now the plan of Republicans is to widen the scope of this, so that's why Republicans now don't want so much the majority, I think, direct in Congress or Senate, but to gain as many states as possible. And then in 2 years, next election, to simply play this game. Democrats won, some Republicans will say it was a mess, it's not clear, and their Congress, state Congress, will do what it do. My problem here is that I don't buy the simple populist solution, which is, yeah, this, we need to abolish alienated politics and introduce some more authentic democracy and so on and so on. It's not, I think the gap is irreducible. So again, how did we come to this? Now I come to the central, very problematic, I hope for some of you, part. There is a general narrative gradually emerging, a narrative on what is going on in the last decades in Western countries. To cut a long story short, it is the return of what was repressed in the age of modernity and enlightenment. It's not just the other side of enlightenment, but also the antagonism which runs through enlightenment is becoming more and more visible. What do I mean by this? The dissatisfaction with the hegemonic ideological coordinates, our spontaneous liberal democratic ideology, let's call it the Fukuyama ideal. And I don't make too much more than it's necessary fun of Fukuyama, because, you know, I met him once, he's quite an honest guy. He no longer is a Fukuyamaist. He no longer believes in the end of history. The last thing I learned from him is that he supports Bernie Sanders. He was honest here. So again, what we are getting is this Fukuyamaist vision of liberal, almost social democratic welfare state is more and more accompanied by its dark shadow, the obscenity of the populist discourse permeated by racist and sexist enjoyment. We are learning the hard way that the attempt of modernity to dispense with traditional forms of domination, father of the family, master, and so on, and install secular democracy failed. The dimension of the master is returning with a vengeance in all its forms: patriarchal values, political authoritarianism, religious fundamentalism, and so on and so on. It was clear already to Freud that the decline of the paternal authority, this is a thing not popular to say today, is an ambiguous process. Father, as a figure of moral authority, nonetheless enables the child to adopt a stance of moral autonomy, resisting the pressure of his, her, its peers, and the pressure of the corrupted social environment. Following Freud in his study back in 1930s, in his study on authority and family, Max Horkheimer, the founder of the Frankfurt School, made the same point, while in the same spirit, Adorno pointed out that one has to repeat this endlessly, that neither Hitler nor Stalin are in any sense paternal figures. They are a new form of obscene master. If you already want a translation, but they are not quite adequate in Freudian terms, it is more something like Urvater, you know, this Freudian myth of the primordial father who is brutal master, exploiting all, directly possessing all women and so on and so on. It is translated into English. This was one of the big books which influenced me when I was young. Alexander Mitscherlich, a Frankfurt School-oriented German psychoanalyst, published in 1966 very important book Auf dem Weg zur vaterlosen Gesellschaft, on the way to society without fathers, where he analyzes in detail the process of the loss of disintegration of paternal authority and how it gives birth to new forms of domination. Now, the obvious answer to this crisis is, but we don't need authorities. People themselves should reign. But here we encounter a problem. In today's populism, the dark, obscene side of the reference to the people made itself palpable. The people to which populism refers doesn't exist. Populism is by definition a mask of power. It is a fantasized entity evoked by new masters to justify their role as the servants of the people, enabling them to dismiss their opponents as the enemies of the people. The first step towards populism was made centuries ago when, to counter the loss of traditional authority, where the leader, king, refers to God, church tradition, the leader proclaimed himself a servant. For example, in Germany, Friedrich der Große, Frederick the Great, defined himself as the first servant of state and his people. And this is how, from the early Enlightenment onwards, a master justifies his rule. He is in reality the greatest servant, the servant of all his subjects' servants. There are, of course, different modalities of this position of serving the servants, from technocracy, technocratic experts, to religious fundamentalism, to obscene clowns, master clown like Donald Trump. The obscene master is not a direct reaction to the failure of the traditional master. This figure is a reaction to the fact that the expert knowledge cannot properly function at the place of the agent of a social link. It has to be supplemented by a new obscene figure. Now, the reaction to this predicament is double. We can reluctantly accept the need to return to some form of social authority, since if the symbolic law, name of the father, loses its authority, desire itself vanishes. That's unfortunately even a very popular position among some, I hate them, I claim, Lacanians. They claim, let's face it, the decline of paternal authority doesn't mean, oh, no father to limit us, we get full enjoyment. It means, since our enjoyment is, so they claim, following St. Paul, by definition transgressive, there is no enjoyment without violating prohibitions. If you lose the authority, prohibitive authority, you lose enjoyment itself. You enter depression, apathy, and so on. And they usually quote the fact, which is an important fact, that in today's society, with all the permissiveness, what we get is a much tighter control, regulation in different forms, either right-wing or left-wing politically correct categorization. So again, the idea is that when paternal authority disintegrates, what we get is so-called pathological narcissism, so that father is no longer an external authority, but simply your competitor. We get this obscene social situation. So the solution is we should go back, restore some kind of paternal authority or symbolic law as the agent of prohibition. Of course, I reject this. But then, in his last years, and I disagree with Lacan here, he was playing with another idea, unfortunately taken over by his, I'm always at loss. What is your daughter's husband to you? Son-in-law, his son-in-law. Sorry? Yeah. Milner brought this to the end. This idea, which can be grounded in some Lacan's furtive formulations, but I don't think this is true Lacan's position. Miller calls for cynical stance. He says that since we cannot return to the authority of the law, what we can do is as if we sustain the law. Like, we know it doesn't work, but at the same time, the law, the authority, but at the same time, we know that without the law, there is chaos, social disintegration, so let's proceed in a cynical way. I don't believe in any foundation of the law, not even in democratic foundation, but let's act as if the law works. Here are two very sad quotes from Miller. A psychoanalyst acts so that semblances, the fake semblance of authority, semblances remain at their places while making sure that the subjects under his psychoanalyst care do not take them as real. One should somehow bring oneself to remain taken in by them, fooled by them. So the axiom of cynical wisdom is that, again, quote from Miller, one should protect the semblances of power for the good reason that one should be able to continue to enjoy. The point is not to attach oneself to the semblances of the existing power, but to consider them necessary. So the law, we should be aware that it's not true, it's a fake, but it's a necessary fake. Now, you know Kafka, I think. You remember towards the end of the trial, this is what the priest tells to Joseph K. when Joseph K. explodes, but what you are telling is that God, the law, is not true. And that whatever priest says, yes, it's not true, but it's necessary. I, of course, reject this way, if for no other reason that I think it's that cynical distance doesn't work, in the sense that even if you subjectively think that you gained distance towards the law, there is more truth in how you act, pretending to believe in the law, than in your inner distance from it. And I have my own political experience here. You know who, I'm sorry, I will now do something horrible. Don't be afraid, no. Although, you know, I will say something just to annoy you. You know what he told me, my good friend, before? He said, say whatever you want, just don't make fun of Jews and not gay people. Okay, I will follow that. I will follow that. Although, my God, you know, if you are not my friend, you know. Okay, no, I will not. I respect it. But what I want to say is that I will take my own example, Yugoslavia. It was a perfect socialist country. I've written about it, maybe you know it, where somewhere from, I would say, 1960s onwards, it wasn't only that even the bureaucracy, ruling class, communist bureaucracy, didn't believe in their own ideology. We went a step further. To make a career in the Central Committee and so on, it was necessary not to take the official ideology seriously. And I had a personal experience, not me myself. I got two friends who were what one cannot but describe honest communists. They took all the Yugoslav ideology, you know, against Soviet bureaucratic socialism. We have self-management, democratic socialism, blah, blah. They took it seriously. They lost their post. Because the ruling bureaucracy knew well that if you take the official ideology seriously, it's one step from dissidence. Because then you will discover, my God, things are not really like that, and so on. So, isn't this wonderful? Again, be careful what I say. I'm not saying just there is brutal power, it doesn't matter if you take it seriously or not. No, you have to have a cynical distance towards it for the power to function properly. So I don't believe that cynicism works. Can I repeat an old joke? Very modest, don't give me yours. I repeated it. I'm afraid you all know it. I used it for some time in all my lectures, but it fits perfectly here. Niels Bohr, my favorite, you know, that eternal story that I repeat. He had a wooden hut somewhere in a forest close to Copenhagen, and he had above the entrance a horseshoe, which is a superstitious item allegedly preventing evil spirits to enter the house. So a French scientist visits him and asks him, Bohr, why do you have this there? Aren't you a scientist? Don't you believe, I hope you don't believe in it. And Bohr gave a perfect Marxist critico-ideological answer. He said, I'm not an idiot, I don't believe it. But I have it there because I was told that it works even if you don't believe in it. That's ideology today. That's the proper cynical approach. We don't believe in law and order, justice, and so on, but we enact it. Now, the next solution formula. Why? Okay, I will nonetheless, I hope I cannot go, say something very positive about the Jews. I hope, no, it will be very correct. You know what worries me most, and you should agree with me here. The tendency that we see now, which I cannot name but Zionist anti-Semitism. By this I mean the following. Did you notice how Western right-wingers who are these extreme populists are here in the States, in Western Europe, anti-Semitic, but they support Israel there? This is a very dangerous game, and I seriously worry when the Israeli government often accepts this game. And I know this from, you know who was the primordial father of all this? It's a horrible name. Read him. Horrible name. You know, the Holocaust father, Reinhard Heydrich. He wrote in 1937 a wonderful with me means horrifying, text where he says, Jews are incredibly creative people, but it's too much for us here in Germany. If Jews go to Palestine, we will support them. They are great people. We will trade with them, just not here. The next guy who did the same, do you remember some, now it's already over 10 years ago, Breivik, that crazy Norwegian who shot a Norwegian friend sent me the translation of some of his texts, where this guy said, Jews are dangerous in the West. We should limit their influence. But there in Palestine, we should fully support them because they are the last bastion of Western civilization and so on and so on. All I'm saying, I hope we all agree, is that this is a very dangerous game. And it's incredible how some of the American religious fundamentalists support Israel, but when you read their reasons, they are horrible. The main reason is that it says in some shitty stuff like that, what comes...
Rapture.
Sorry?
The rapture.
Yeah, which I think it's the beginning of anti-Semitism, the beginning of the... And John's, how do you call it? What's evangel...
There's at least a website. I don't know if it's a real. It's probably not real.
Yeah.
There's a rapture pet care is offered in the United Kingdom. So for people who are not of the Christian faith, they can pair their pets.
Oh, really?
With
Oh my God, there are so
true
many
believers,
interesting
so that
things.
when you all go up to the rapture.
Yeah. No, what I want to say is that the usual explanation is it says somewhere there that before Armageddon, Jews will take over the Holy Land. Well, then with Armageddon, they will be burned also if they don't turn Christians. But with this very strange justification, they support Israel. Like, yeah, be there so as a guarantee that, that you will be burned. You know. You know what is, for me, allow me another improvisation. We are out of dangerous waters. Did you see Rapture? Not Rapture U, but Rapture R-A, no? Rapture, like... Did you see a wonderful movie with Mimi Rogers? Please, download it. You get it for Rapture. I think it's an example of what I call Christian atheism. The most radical critique of Christianity, but taking it seriously from inside. Download it, you will be shocked. The first 3/4 of the movie is the usual drama and so on. Mimi Rogers plays a promiscuous young woman who goes into that swinging and so on. Then she falls in love with a guy, they marry, they have a daughter or son, I forget, but the guy, her husband, is killed in an accidental way by a burglar, and this breaks her down. So she has this idea how to rejoin her husband, and she thinks that if she moves with her child into a desert, that she will be rapture taken into heaven, and she spends there a year or two, nothing happens, blah, blah. Then she has the idea, her daughter, I think it's daughter, tells her, Mommy, but why don't you simply kill me and then yourself, and it will happen immediately. She kills her daughter, but somehow, it happens, cannot kill herself. Then she is arrested for this. I simplified the story. Then she is in prison. Now, if at that point the movie were to end, it would have been a kind of a standard psychological drama. The delusion, despair of blah, blah. But then something incredible happens. While she is in prison, the apocalypse rapture happens. It states. All of a sudden, the walls of the prison disintegrate. She goes out. You see 4 riders of the apocalypse there riding. And she goes to a car. A policeman who supports her is with her. And they just drive, and come to the edge of our world, where you see, it's of course mythic, where you see a beautiful mountain paradise. And there, her dead husband and daughter come to the edge to them and say, so glad, just say, I love Jesus, and and you will enter. And Mimi Rogers said, no, I cannot do it. They ask her why. She says, God did so many horrible things to me, I cannot say that sincerely. I don't want to serve God in any way, not even rhetorically. Then they said, but you know what this means, her dead husband. It means, how long will you stay there like that? And that's the last sentence. She said, I know, forever. This is for me a true and a deeply Christian undermining of religion, which is internal to religion. Any idiot can say there is no God and so on, but as Jacques Lacan put it in his wonderful reading of Pascalian Blaise Pascal wager, the true thing is not I act as if there is no God. It is to say, even if God exists, I will act as if God doesn't exist. And in a wonderful reading, Lacan proves that this is the immanent truth of Pascalian wager, that this is the true wager. As Lacan put it literally, true atheism is not there is no God. True atheism is, even if there is God, I will not serve him. Okay. We don't have time to go further in this direction, so let's go into the opposite way to cynicism. Why a master at all? Because the other way to deal with the decline of traditional authority is the anarchist way. And anarchism, as you all know, is enjoying a revival today, from Noam Chomsky to David Graeber. Anarchism is not against public power. Catherine Malabou, whom I appreciate very much, I mean, she's one of the women who wrote one of the best books on Hegel in last decades. And what finally overturned me to feminism is not this bullshit, women's rights, blah, blah, blah. It's that how could I not be a feminist when I am compelled to admit that all the really great texts on Hegel in the last 20 years are written by women? Rebecca Comey, Catherine Malabou, and so on.
Robin Marasco at
Sorry?
Hunter College. Robin Marasco at Hunter College, our colleague, also has a wonderful book on Hegel. Our colleague Robin Marasco at Hunter College.
Is he a man?
She, Robin.
Yeah, Robin, yeah. No, really, that's wonderful, because there are others. You have that, sorry for the sexist undertone, Rocio Zambrana, or who? The Puerto Rican Hegelian, who also wrote a wonderful book on Hegel in a beautiful way. She's a radical leftist criticizing this, how should I call it, liberal Hegelianism, which focuses on mutual recognition and so on and so on. Let me go on. So, Catherine Malabou refers to Jacques Rancière, who asserts radical equality between citizens who are considered to be able to both command and obey. So, for anarchists, there is public power, but true democracy would rely on the contingency of who governs and who is governed, because governing does not require any particular skill. And I think you don't have to be anarchist to accept this. Look, that's what's so great in our legal system even. Hegel knew this when he wrote that, how do you call the idiots who are selected by the jury, or how?
Jurors?
Juror, yeah. They are selected more or less, okay, if you are not a complete idiot or whatever, but by lot, no? And Hegel says this is crucial. Yes, you have the expert judge, blah, blah, but the decision must be made by a group of people who are in principle equal to you. Like the jurors. If you don't do this, you are in the authoritarian system of experts and so on and so on. But then, there is a problem with this stance. Etienne Balibar goes to the crux of the problem. In a big book, I think you also get it on whatever, you can download it on YouTube even, I don't know where. Here is a quote from Balibar. The anarchist will say that we are able to imagine and realize in practice an alternative social fabric because the whole society could, one way or another, emerge from forms of self-government and self-organization that can be experienced and experimented with at the level of cooperatives, towns, and so on. Today, this idea is becoming increasingly influential, and people give us examples of what the Kurdish fighters tried in Rojava. And incidentally, Rojava, you know, the north of Syria, was one of the few places, and here I agreed even with Chomsky. You remember when under Trump, Trump decided to withdraw American army from keeping safe the Kurds there. And even Chomsky said, this one case, it was not good for Americans to live, because the poor Kurds there were basically left to Erdogan or Syrians dominated by Russians in the south. And it's incredible. Rojava is basically a small, sorry, I mean it respectively, city town, but they have an incredibly lively university. I was invited there. I gave Zoom talks. It's an incredible, you know, which was another place where this happens. That's why I also think United States were wrong to, in such a stupid way, to withdraw from Afghanistan. It wasn't just American occupation. Under American occupation, there were new forms of feminism, civil life. Do you know that in Afghanistan, till Taliban took over, there were groups of Marxists and so on. They wanted to invite me. There was a group, some kind of, I don't know what kind of, they call themselves theater, where I spoke with the guy. It's a German Scandinavian guy. He organized it. They asked Goran Terborn, well-known Swedish Marxist. They thought, okay, 20, 30 idiots will come. 400 young Afghans came. Don't underestimate, precisely because the situation was desperate, they only had art and theory. But let's go on. Can this work? Malabou herself points two problems with this. First, it's very intelligent argument, a Hegelian. You should be a Hegelian to make it. Anarchism is becoming today a key feature of global capitalism itself. Quote from Malabou, our current epoch is characterized by a coexistence between a de facto anarchism and a dawning or awakening anarchism. De facto anarchism is the reign of anarcho-capitalism, which is contemporaneous with the end of the welfare state, creating in citizens a feeling of abandonment. Just think of the state of hospitals and healthcare today. My contention is that current capitalism is undertaking its anarchist or libertarian turn. A general Uberization, like Uber, the taxis and so on, of life. Second, even more intelligent point by Malabou, this anarcho-capitalism is the other side of new authoritarianism. Quote, authoritarianism does not contradict the disappearance of the state. It is its messenger, the mask of this so-called collaborative economy, which, by bringing professionals and users into direct contact through technological platforms, pulverizes all fixity. I don't want to lose time here. If you want an example, just think about Elon Musk. This obscenity of neo-feudalism, in what sense? I don't like this metaphor. We are approaching a neo-feudal society, but here it has some weight. Look, what Musk did with his, now, what did he buy, Twitter? No, it's a new form of what Marx called privatization of the commons. It's not the old form where you have commons, common property, and then one capitalist grabs this part. No, commons remain commons, but they are owned by a private person. And that's the paradox of what Musk is doing. Like, isn't it madness that one guy bought as his private property one of the key mediums of our commons. We communicate in it and treat it as its property. Isn't this obscene? That a guy says, if I buy Google, I will decide, Twitter, I will decide the fate of our democracy and all that crap. Which is why, don't misunderstand me. Now I will really say, but not something obscene. When people ask me, are you for death penalty? I say, in principle, yes, but after we kill some people. And Musk is among them. Okay, stop it. What this means is that the authoritarianism is the other side of the disappearance of the state. More precisely, the disappearance of the most precious function of the state, that of providing public services. We thereby touch the vast domain of public services, healthcare, education, which cannot be provided, I think, through expanding cooperatives and other forms of local self-organization. Balibar makes this point clear. Another quote from Balibar. If you look at the poor in American suburbs, mainly African Americans and other migrant groups, what they suffer from is the fact that America never really had a welfare state in the British, French, or German sense. The catastrophe for them is not that there is too much state. It is that there is not enough of the state. And I think we should shamelessly proceed in this direction. It's a choice. I cannot argue for it today, but I want to say that, you know, like it's easy to say authentic, we need broader authority, but it should grow organically from local communities and so on. It's too late for that. The example that I repeat all the time in the last days, think about the terrible heat dome, you remember, a year and a half ago, the previous summer, Northwest United States, Southwest Canada, where temperatures were, I don't know your crazy Fahrenheit numbers, they were almost Middle East, not almost. At some point, Vancouver and Seattle were warmer than the Middle East. Now, what the fuck will you say there with local approach? No, because they are even not so bad in their ecological activity there. It had almost nothing to do with what they are doing there. Heat dome means that a global disturbance of how air circulates in the north of our hemisphere beneath Arctic, something is perturbed there. We need, in this sense, more globalization. And now, I don't want really, just if you allow me to finish. Yeah. You said a little bit too eagerly.
Yeah, no.
I expected you. No, this was what I meant before an offer to be refused. No. I expected you to say, no, Slavoj, we love you, just go on. But you notice how immediately you jumped to it.
It's like when a waiter asks you, how are you, and you answer.
I did once. My God, this is a wonderful way how I misunderstood these unwritten rules. The first time in mid-1980s that I came to United States, I didn't know your local Aboriginal manners. So the waiter asked me, how are you? And I was such an idiot. I'm answering, sorry, I just flew from Europe, I'm still jet-lagged, and so on. The waiter looked at me, don't you get it? Are you stupid or what? You know. Okay. You know what's the big problem today? Let me just, this is part of a longer text, conclude with the function of authority today. I think it's way too simple to just say we need to abolish authority. I will read you a quote. I mentioned this, but I didn't quote exactly. From, I have big problems with Hannah Arendt, but she wrote a short text on education, where she makes a wonderful remark on parental authority. A quote: "Modern man could find no clearer expression for his dissatisfaction with the world, for his disgust with things as they are, than by his refusal to assume in respect to his children responsibility for all this. It is as though parents daily say, in this world even we are not very securely at home. How to move about in it, what to know, what skills to master are mysteries to us also. You must try to make out as best as you can. In any case, you are not entitled to call us to account. We are innocent. We wash our hands of you. So you know what's the idea? Like your son asks you, my God, it's a sheet, please give me some security. And the most comfortable thing, although it's true, that's the point, is to say, sorry, we live in a messy world. I'm also at a loss. I cannot be your authority. So again, it's factual true, but it is nonetheless existentially false. A parent should not wash her hands in this way. Incidentally, I'm so sad, here we approach some kind of a theory that I don't have time to go into this. It's the same with predeterminism, either the old religious one or this scientific idea that all our acts are, it's not a religious predestination, but determined. You know, the formula is freedom is user's illusion. And I don't have time to go in this wonderful debate, like what happens with us if I can scientifically prove that my acts are already neuronally, whatever, or socially also to a point, predetermined. You know whom you should read? He is a genius, and I will tell you why. Benjamin Libet, a guy, I think, somewhere there in Berkeley, at Berkeley, already 30 years ago, even more, I think 40, he made his famous experiment, and some idiots took it as a proof that there is no free will. He wired you, then he asked you just to do something like, whenever you want, you pick up, let's say, these glasses. And he proved that before you make the decision, the commands in your nerves to your hand to move are already on the way. In other words, when you make even a contingent free decision, you just become aware in your mind of something which is already going on in your. But he is a good Jewish Hegelian and adds something wonderful. He says, wonderful idea, this doesn't prove that there is no free will. His point is that the mistake here is to focus on positive decisions. He said the space of free will is that even when you decide to do something, you block it, sabotage it in the middle. That's the zero level of freedom, and there are wonderful debates on it. But what I'm trying to tell you is this. Let's say you are convinced that you don't have free will. It's just your illusion. So what can you do when, I'm sorry for this pathetic example, you go here across the street to Central Park, don't you have some stupid lake there? You see a small boy or girl drowning there. Well, if you really believe in the full determination, you would say, fuck it, it's determined. Why should I worry? It's already written what I will do. But isn't it that, and the whole logic of Protestantism, which is why I agree with my friend Fred Jameson, who said that the most interesting theological notion for a Marxist is predestination. The whole problem of Protestantism, you know what's the paradox of Protestantism? On the one hand, predestination. On the other hand, Protestantism was, originally at least, the religion of capitalism, which is the most dynamic order. So the problem is this one. You are predestined, but you don't know how you are predetermined. And I think the true freedom is not this vulgar idea of, oh, I go to a patisserie, oh, I'm free to choose cheesecake or strawberry cake or whatever. No, the true freedom is, I have to do something, I know it's predetermined, And I'm terribly afraid that I will, by chance, miss what I'm determined to do. You know, this worry, it's predetermined, but my God, what if I miss it somehow? That's that full anxiety of that you experience. Why? Because you know, the problem is that freedom may be a user's illusion, but predetermination in the sense of I'm just a passive machine, brains are, environment is playing its games through me. I cannot subjectively assume it. The moment I consciously act like this, like my imagination is so evil. I said to the small girl, bye-bye, drown happily, I'm predetermined, sorry not to help you. It's false. You have to act as if you are free, even if you are predetermined. And isn't the same with, back to Hannah Arendt's example with the unfortunate parent. Even if it's true that you are not master of the game, you are not allowed ethically to act like that. It's disgusting to say, sorry, I'm not. No, even if you know that your authority is a fake, you have to heroically assume it. And I don't have time to develop it now, but this is not cynicism. You authentically assume it. So just to finish, you know what would be for me the basic figure of a new, not master, but leader? Now, I was very critical towards Obama. But you remember at the beginning, he repeated this message, yes, we can. Yes, we can. This is, I think, the authentic leader's message. It's not, I know, this is the Stalinist master who tells you, I know better than you what is good for you. No, the authentic master's message is, paradoxically, I give to you your freedom. I open the space for you. And there is a nice underlying premise here. It's that what we in our societies experience as freedom, especially as freedom of choice, is really this consumerist freedom, cheesecake or strawberry cake in different forms, which is really a form of our slavery. You accept the choices offered to you by society and you play games within this sphere. The true act of freedom is to change, to undermine the very scope, the whole field of options. And for this, you need a leader. Not a leader who knows better than you, but you need, as it were, to be pushed from outside, to be told, yes, you can. I'm not saying that Obama then did it, but all proper leaders, the one who also ultimately failed, it's very sad, but let's go to the highest, Nelson Mandela. His message was, yes, we can. We can get rid of, we can break down apartheid and so on and so on. So that's again, a different type of leader. It just kind of literally pushes you into freedom. Maybe it's time to stop. I hope you will still talk with me, although I broke some of the rules. Where are we now? What's the time?
So it's 7:25, and I was asked to just do a little response, and then we could open it up, okay?
Now I like this totalitarian twist of you. I was asked by whom? By yourself, I think, you know.
I asked, well, I won't be, that makes sense, right, Peter? Okay. So I just wanted to thank Slavoj again for such a wonderful, can we just give another round of applause for our guest?
No. You know, for me, you know my rhetorical trick, whenever you begin your remarks in this way, I already see your other hand sharpening the knife
I'm sharpening the knife.
behind your...
No, I want to just quickly respond to a few things, and then,
Okay,
we'll
please.
open it up.
Yeah.
So I just, this idea of the joke that he made about what we can't say, which was a joke, but I think it's
Sorry,
really
which
interesting.
joke? I
This
forgot.
idea of what we can't talk about, the joke that you made about. Anyway.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make this point, and
So
I think
we
it's
can
really,
talk about
I
it,
think
yes,
it's really,
actually.
really important. When you think about like Slavoi's that are intellectual discourse, there is the joke aspect of it. There is the works that he prefers, which are those sort of long philosophical excursions, and it's the contemporary political interventions. And I've always thought that these were a choice. Like you could have the jokester, you could have the contemporary political intervention, or you could have a long excursus on Schelling. And I realize that it's not a choice. They are all concurrent. And the reason why they're all concurrent is because, and we're lucky to see this now, there's this war on what Hegel calls the ready-made anytime you do a presentation. You have to understand the sort of ironies. You have to understand the idea that there's a war on like the kind of tendencies of bourgeois narrative and just the ready-mades of the thought toolbox that we're working with, that the jokes, the serious Sloterdijk, the Schelling, the Arendt, and the discussions of what's going on now all kind of are interdependent dialectically. So I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to just briefly just hit a couple of notes about the Polish regimen in Haiti and the Constitution.
Did I simplify something?
Well, no,
that-
I just wanted to clarify.
Please, yeah.
So, the Constitution is really, really interesting because what it says is that Haiti is an abolitionist nation, Haiti is black, and everyone who decides to remain in Haiti are black members of this radical
Sorry
abolitionist
to interrupt you,
nation.
just to so am I right? Because I read
Well,
the Constitution. No, that it says a wonderful thing. It says every citizen of Haiti, independently of the color of his skin, is black.
Right.
That's a wonderful, because we think the opposite. The good blacks should be white. You know?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So I mean, this is a model of affiliation in terms of radical political abolitionist citizenship. So the other people, in terms of the French, they were said, okay, you could leave, or you could, be purged, right? But those are three different stages. You can either, no matter who you are, join this nation. You can go back to, Marseille, or you can be purged. I just wanted to point that out. And then finally, and related to that, because I'm just going in the order, this notion of the surplus, right, in terms of the European Union particularly. And it's interesting because I remember Balabar early on, wrote all these theoretical texts when I was in grad school, when the EU really was just cohering. I want to just gently retort to my friend here and say, like, we have enough abundance, we have enough technological innovation, and we have enough wealth where we can imagine the kind of stability that you were talking about with the EU that doesn't involve the surplus exploitation of the global South, right?
But sorry,
Yeah.
just to, and then you
Yeah,
can,
yeah. And then
you
we only
know
have
what
one more
I
point.
would only add to this.
Yeah.
Europe is basically egotist. But my hope is that with Ukraine war and so on, we will become finally aware of the fact that the times are over, when we can just care about our welfare and then let the world go to hell and so on. This game of within our walls limited welfare is over.
Yeah.
now.
And then my last point is just that on this question of rapture, Rojava, Rogers, and religion. That's a lot. But, the millenarian strand that involves rapture is a really, really, I think, dangerous floodgate of anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim sentiment. Like this, and it's interesting theologically to contrast that with what Slavoj writes about, which is the Catholic focus on the crucifixion, not on the rapture and not on the transcendence.
Yeah.
And there's a whole Hegelian legacy of thinking about the three and the one in Christ, and that when Christ is on the cross and says, why have I forsaken me, when he is at his most godlike, he is his most human.
Yeah.
And related to Rogers and finally Rojava, and then I'll shut up,
What is Roger?
Rogers,
Sorry.
Mimi Rogers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
this
didn't
Rapture
know.
film that you're talking about when we were
Did you
talking
see
about.
it?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I think that this is a very it's a reconfiguration of Job, in this
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
profound way.
Can I ask you,
which gets us back
you
to
are a
this
Jewish
question.
person. Can I? No, it's not a bad joke.
Yeah.
But can I ask you why you Jews, or even Catholics, Christians, why were you so stupid, all of you Catholics, all of us, to allow when there was that Constantine, where they in 3rd century, where they retroactively decided what fits the Bible? Why were they so stupid to leave the book of Job in there? Because it's for me the most subversive, incredible part of the Bible. If I were to be interested in Christianity as an edifice to hold power and so on, blah blah, it would go out all that.
Yeah, I didn't make that decision.
I know.
And then just to wrap up about Rojava, because I was in Aufbau sent me.
You were there?
I was in Zurich with Aufbau during an organization during May Day, and I met the battalions fighting in Rojava, and it's really interesting because what they did. You talked about anarchism, and you talked about this sort of patriarchal authority, and you talked about queer theory and the family. What they did in Rojava was really fascinating. They took a pretty top-down, anti-imperialist, Marxist-Leninist model and completely reinvigorated it with queer theory, with feminist critique of the family, with all kinds of decentralization, anarcho-feminist, and queer theory models, not in opposed to their sort of anti-imperialist Marxist model, but strictly as supplementary. Right, and I just thought about it because, again, I had mentioned Professor Morosco at Hunter in the Political Science Department and her book on Hegel and Fanon and Adorno. But it's also my understanding that her current work is really looking at this sort of the construction of the family, and there's a lot of resources there. So that's what I wanted to say. To wrap up, and then that's it. But I mean, I feel like I had some questions, but we should probably open it up,
but just
right?
If I may briefly reply, it's very important. First, I know who is the guy who is now for years in prison, the head of that PKK, whatever. I forgot his name.
It's like an O and A and X, and I'm not good at this.
Okay, the
Oxlan,
Turkey.
Oxlan, yeah.
He is in
Oxalan,
prison.
Oxalan,
The leader of Kurds. No.
His theoretical writings, it's taking this top-down family model, parental
Yeah,
figure.
but at the same time, he's now reading like crazy. I know because I know people who know him, have contact with him in prison. He reads now feminism, quantum physics, whatever, everything. And he's a wonderful guy. He knows me. You know how I learned this? Sorry, it's a stupid anecdote, but it's a wonderful one. Once I was, trigger warning, it's a little bit obscene, but in a very friendly way. Once I was in Turkey and some stupid journalist was annoying me, like just a couple of short questions, quick answers. Okay, then it went into this totally non-theoretical private direction, like, what's the best ideal situation in which you would like to find yourself? You don't ask me this if you are aware how my dirty mind works. I told him my ideal situation is to be in bed with a beautiful naked lady and debate philosophy with her. 2 days afterwards, this guy, I forgot his name, wrote from prison an open letter to this journal claiming, I agree with Professor Zizek, I would also like to be in that position. How can you not like this guy? But quite seriously, what you said is so important, it's miraculous. It's how something, the Kurdish resistance that people were dismissing at, just killing totalitarian, got into this. I mean, it's one of the miracles.
No,
today.
and I mean, the best works critiquing neoliberalism and capital come from that queer theory and feminist lens. So to graft that onto a real militant praxis where you're actually fighting, you are the most effective fighting formation against ISIS. That's really optimistic.
That's also true.
For
And
me.
do you know, I hope you must know better, it wasn't a myth that among their fighters, there were many women.
Yeah.
They had women. But another thing, I just want to add, it's interesting, it's extremely important what you said about jokes. And I know this from my own experience, Yugoslav-Balkan War, from historical experience, that, you know, jokes are not just jokes. It's my old point, I repeat it. When you are really in deep shit, tragedy, mass murders, it's too early, it's still too traumatic for you to adopt a properly tragic attitude of mourning. The only way to do it is through jokes. And this was confirmed when I first learned that, you know, that in Poland, already in the world, during World War II and after, there was a whole series by the Jews of Auschwitz jokes. And that was their idea. It's so traumatic that we cannot play, oh, tragedy, or blah, blah, blah. No, it's there. When things, you know, tragedy implies a certain dignity for you as a victim. Like, somebody is beating you, you open your shirt, beat me, but you will never kill my spirit. No, when you are really down. And I was so glad to discover that the well-known massacre during the Bosnian War, the city of Srebrenica, they have now, and following your instruction, I will not tell you not even one of them, because they are undescribably filthy. Even I was shocked. But they have they have, don't provoke me too much, because then, no, but what I want to say, they have a whole tradition of incredible jokes, and I spoke with them. And they told me, sorry, it's still too hot, too traumatic for us. We cannot yet afford. This is why my other point, and with this I will not take too much time, I'll finish. First, that's why it's something so profoundly true in the fact that the films about Holocaust, most of them, the best, are comedies. It's necessary. It would be still even today a fake to do it as a tragedy and so on. And I don't even, I think La Vita è Bella, Benigni, even, you know what I don't like in that movie? I met in Italy the one who wrote the script for Benigni, and he was shocked by my idea but agreed with it. You saw the movie, I will not lose time. You remember the father with his son in concentration camp, probably Auschwitz, and to make the situation for his son tolerable, he invents a lie, that it's really just a big competition test. If you survive, you get a big prize. They can leave if they want at any moment, blah, blah, blah. But the end of the movie screws everything up, because at the end you are supposed to cry. The son survives and blah, blah, blah. I imagined a much more comical, but at the same time, totally desperate ending of the movie. When the father, played by Benigni himself, is taken to be executed, he tried to turn it into a joke, mockingly, like, oh, it's all a joke, salutes it. But what if, through some small gesture, at that moment, he would discover that his son also all the time knew the truth, but just feigned to believe his father to make it easier for him, for this father, so that it was much easier for his father to be able to say to him, oh, at least my son doesn't know the seriousness. Wouldn't that be a truly desperate ending, you know? But so the really good one, who did this? Liliana Cavanier, who, do you know Pasqualino Sette Bellezze? The other, Lina Wertmüller, sorry. That one, precisely because it's more to the comic, is much more desperate, serious. If I were to choose one, I will stick to that movie. You should see it. You get everything today, but I come from a happy country. In contrast to you, I don't know how it is here. We are such a small shithole of a country that the big companies don't care if we download through Pirate Bay and so on. We are too small a market because, you know, big company must invest to follow, and we are free. You can freely download everything, so sorry, I end. Please.
Well, we at Hunter care very much about intellectual property. property rights.
Why?
Anyway, okay, so we should just open this up.
I'm gonna squeeze in a quick question, but then we're gonna pass the mic. Actually, I'm not gonna squeeze in a quick question because we're running out of time. So here you go, sir.
You, the green guy, sorry.
So one on the Brazilian election, it confronts a working class, the elected president is a working class from a labor party, and the confrontant is a neo-fascist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does this?
You know
reflect
why it is important? Because I think Brazil is in some sense ahead of us. It makes, I'm not saying something very deep, it's just an observation. You know, they have a true choice. This centrist, benevolent, American democratic, liberal democracy, they should be aware that, you know, some of them are telling me now that we have to find Trump, forget about your leftist agenda, we should just redeem, keep alive. No, I think the only way to save what is worth saving in liberal democracy is to move to the left. Not terrorist left, but what Lula is doing, I know all the criticism of Lula and so on, but I think Lula is part of a movement which is, I think, maybe you know more, disagree with me. It's nonetheless, I followed closely, I even intervened there I made in my broken Spanish some statements for Chile, for Bolivia, my God, Linera, the greatest guy, is my friend. Then for Colombia, no? Something is important is happening there. A radical in Bolivia, isn't this wonderful? Radical left came to power, and in the 10 years, even 12, of first Morales regime, they didn't screw up the economy. They kept the system working, but really the ordinary people lived much better, and Linera explained this to me how he did it. He is a genius. He said, in a cynical, benevolent way, Evo Morales sits there, smokes coke, whatever, leave him there. But he said, for example, you know that when Morales took over, down there in the valley, Santa Cruz, there were the rich guys opposing Morales. And unfortunately, I must say, they were from my own part of the world. The main group there were fascist Ustashi immigrants from Croatia. So they wanted secession, to break Bolivia into two. And Linera, you know what he did? I love this. He addressed the army, because the army never likes a state to break down. So it was incredible thing. Everybody thought army, the right-wingers, but the army saved Morales' regime. And so what I want to say is that that's why, wasn't this a miracle? You remember there was a coup d'etat by that nominal leader, crazy lady who brought a heavy, thick Bible there. But then half a year later, elections, and they won again. It's incredible. I think this is, I hope, with all the ups and downs, like it made me very sad when in Chile they lost the key referendum for constitution. So I'm sorry if this will sound too soft, but I don't have any big hope in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba. This should be our models, you know. This is something to look for. It is, in some sense, a more radical left. But at the same time, you know, they know how to resist this eternal leftist temptation. Let's do some radical moves, then we will screw economy, everything, and then when we lose power, we will withdraw to academia and write excellent thick books about why we had to lose because of imperialism and so on and so on. You know, what I call this principled pragmatism. You are a principled radical leftist, but you resist the temptation of, you know, even if we lose power or whatever. And you know, Linera told me that his source here was Lenin himself, New Economic Politics. Lenin saw immediately we have to change our politics after the final victory of the October Revolution and so on and so on. So I don't know what you think. Okay, I don't know the details of the situation, but what I wanted to say is that that's what I like in Brazil. The choice is clear. Neo-fascism versus a modern, but nonetheless not modern as simply part of the liberal establishment. Nonetheless, authentically more radical left. This is, and this should be again our message to liberals. We appreciate your legacy, freedom of the press, blah, blah, blah. But the way to maintain this legacy is not let's move more to the center so that we don't lose centuries. No, Trump was a genius here. You know, when people, after Trump's 8 years ago, or no, 6, victory, you know that people were telling to Trump, you are too radical, you should move more to the center. Trump did the exact opposite, and we should do the same. I don't think that the way to say what is worth saying of liberal democracy is to be obsessed with this, let's not lose the middle ground. This opportunistic middle ground is disintegrating.
I have a question from a student in the back.
In Heaven and Disorder, you write about how you met Julian Assange and your time in visiting him when they tried to cover a cup of coffee. Can you talk about that experience and what Julian Assange means for our democracy?
I think, and here I'm even fair, and with all my critique of Putin and so on, it's very sad that we left to Putin this option of, you know, Snowden, Assange. I mean, for me, it's always Ukraine and Assange. The worst thing to do is to say, now, the big danger is Russian imperialism, so let's forget about Assange and so on and so on. The reason I support Assange is not so much the early WikiLeaks documents. It's much more, I think Assange's key work is, you know that he wrote a book which is much more subversive and past, not quite, but more or less unnoticed. He wrote a book on Google, where he defined Google as a private version of NSA, National Security Agency. And the message of Assange for me is, today in the West, and that's how also Assange answered the reproach, but there is dictatorship in China, in other parts, why do you focus on the United States? And I took it from him, a very intelligent answer. He says, the good thing, ironically, about China, Russia, is that their oppression is felt. You know, nobody has the illusion of that there is no state oppression. While the dangerous thing in the West is that, as I use always this formula, as I put it somewhere, the most dangerous form of unfreedom is unfreedom which you even experience as freedom. What is more free than to surf around the web, blah, 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 but you're already totally controlled there, and so on and so on. This is, I think, his basic message, and it's totally irrational what is happening. I mean, Assange is a little bit dry legal guy, but he has wonderful, he didn't lose his spirit, I will put it like this, you know. The last time I met him, at that time, the incident with coffee in prison, you think we thought about freedom. No, we talked about new TV series. This was wonderful. We talked about, you know that, how was it, that series based on Philip Dick novels, Man in the High Castle. He gave me a wonderful reading that the alternate version, where it happened the way it happened, is not simply the truth. That it's another, and that how there is a third totally repressed absent point of reference. I will not go into it, but I like this so much that in spite of this horrible situation, because the authorities, British authorities, brutally used the pandemic, to put him in an impossible, for example, when he married in prison, it had to be done through a glass, but it's a scandal. A week before, a big mafioso serial killer got married in prison, and they were given a big room, 30 guests, and so on and so on. I mean, it's totally, and also the whole legal base, sorry, he is not an American citizen. Under what conditions can he be accused, can he be brought to court for breaking American laws and so on? I mean, it's such a scandal, and especially in these days, today, we should bear in mind that. And he also told me the entire story of Snowden. That Snowden, I forgot his name. Sorry? Yeah. Because he was engaged in it. Snowden did not choose Russia. You remember 10 or how many years ago? He was stuck in Hong Kong. China said, okay, he can stay. They didn't want trouble with United States, and China said, okay. 2 weeks they gave him there, and then they said he has to go. And Assange told me he and his friends were desperately looking for another place. First, it was Latin America. There were some transport problems. It wasn't possible. Then they turned to Europe, and all these freedom-loving European countries, France, Sweden, and so on, no, nobody wanted him. That's why he doesn't even like. He is almost courageous when in an interview some 2-3 years ago, Snowden said openly, I know they manipulate me, I don't like to be here in Russia, I would like to move to a European country. I mean, it was all so humiliating. So again, precisely in this euphoria for Ukraine, and I'm pro-Ukrainian, we should not forget about this other side. How, we have enough blood on our own hands. It's so crucial. What I am just afraid is that how Ukrainian war is now exploited to forget about that, to justify all that. And this is what really makes me sad. There are even some, I'm for Ukraine, but also when it's needed, critical towards Ukraine. At least 2-3 things. First, and this is something shameful for the West, that the West is already imposing on Ukrainians their own neoliberal economic model, and Ukrainians were aware of it. They tried to block it. For example, that over 1/3 of the best, and they have the best earth, that black earth, is already owned by foreign agricultural conglomerates, big companies. So they are already brutally imposing on Ukraine a neoliberal model. The other thing which is horrible is that it shocked many leftist friends of Ukraine that one of the people around Zelensky, not Zelensky himself, protested when, you remember, the last Nobel Peace Prize. It was given to some Ukrainian humanitarian charity agency and to some Belarusian and Russian. And Ukrainian idiots close to Zelensky, to the top, protested, claiming, they protested, but they didn't achieve anything. So isn't it a shame that citizens of a country which is now attacking Ukraine got the Nobel Prize? This is, for me, madness. They want to stigmatize Russia as such, and I warn them, they are talking the same language as Russia. Instead of saying Putin doesn't really stand for what's best in the Russian people, we are fighting universal fight, they are repeating from the other side this Alexander Dugin and Russian bullshit about how it's Russian truth versus European truth. The moment we say this, we are lost, I think. So it's very, very, very sad. I think we have to take care of this. The most dangerous thing now is to say everything is subordinated to Russia, to beating the Russians, so forget about all other things and so on. Sorry, I speak too much, please.
I speak less. So following his question about Brazil,
Yeah.
now we have Netanyahu in Israel.
Don't
Even though you
even
don't
mention
want
me.
to speak.
It gives me, my good friend Udi Aloni keeps me informed, and this is worse than nightmare. This is, sorry to interrupt you, but okay, finish your question, I'm sorry.
No, I was in Switzerland in Lugano 2014. I have a most liberal friend. He was complaining about the immigrants. I knew at that time this is going to go through all over the Europe and come and hit America. Whatever may be the philosophical contours of this, it happened. I think in a way, I'm sorry I'm making a commentary, in a way, there is a white privilege in this country. So there
white?
is white privilege.
Yeah.
So anytime that is threatened by, now they're using immigrants as scapegoats
yeah.
to do that. I think that's happening all over the Europe, Nazi, Germany, France, whatever you want to say. So my thinking is, when I was 60s, some of the people called hippies, they're no more hippies,
Yeah.
they told me we failed the revolution here in 60s. So America was set up in such a way there can be a revolution, there can only be evolution. So do you recommend a kind of starting a Fabian society movement in America? Forget about
No, the
Bernie.
situation I think is much more tragic. Tragic in the sense that, again, with all my unconditional support for LGBT plus and all that, but the way some of this, even feminist protest is formulated, it can be also exploited by Western establishment in a slightly racist way, like, you know, we are the only true feminists, the undeveloped countries are male chauvinists, we have to export our, so what I will, but the true danger I see, I will make another point here, is this one. You know, don't underestimate the ability of the hegemonic ruling system to incorporate a certain very limited mode of openness towards other races, women, and so on, to maintain its power. For example, in England, I think it's crazy what is happening now. We got Boris Johnson, white man. Now we got Rishi Sunak, which is much more to the right. And the one who was most to the right was, I forgot his name, Kwartung, something like this. An elite, purely black African, but a totally crazy right-winger. His idea was the only way to keep economy going is to lower the taxes from 45 to 25% for the very rich. So, you know, and Liz Truss, a woman, so you know the irony. Liz Truss government, it was a woman, an Indian, an African, and it was the most right-wing government ever in England. So again, I know this is fake feminism, fake anti-racism, but don't underestimate the ability of the system, you know, to do this. Which is why, did you notice how, when was this? 6 years ago, or when Bernie Sanders was running for it, did you notice how the establishment, pro-Hillary, tried to use a fact that he is an old white man in this subtle way, like they tried almost to paint him as anti-feminist or whatever, like, my God, we have Hillary here. And no matter what Bernie did, like, first they wanted to paint him as not even black solidarity. He demonstrated it when, as a young guy, when Martin Luther King organized, he was there and so on. So again, don't underestimate the way, I still am here a traditional Marxist, the basic conflict is the one of privileged, exploited, and so on. But that the regime, whatever we call it, is ready to make great concessions here. The other thing is, and this is also, many leftists don't agree with me here, how the system is manipulating the immigrant issue. They like to scare ordinary people with immigrants, you know, so that usually we then get this totally paradoxical situation. The further you move up on the social scale, the more they pretend to be for immigrants. And they play this subtle game that, oh, it's the primitive lower classes who are, it's an ingenious strategy of to have a conflict between lower classes, and then you on the top can play this game of and so on. It's a very messy situation, you know, and a lot of work has to be done here. Like what you will say to a common worker who is afraid of losing his job because you have immigrants who are ready to work for lesser salary. It's too cynical to tell him, sorry guy, world immigrants, you have to sacrifice yourself, and so on and so on. Which is why, now I will say something for which many leftists criticize me. I am for much larger opening, absolutely, to immigrants and so on, but do not forget that opening the gates to immigrants is not a long-term solution. The first thing, at least in Europe, statistics are clear. You know that the immigrants are mostly, yes, you get women, children, the privileged one. There is a tremendous illegal smuggling of immigrants industry. It turns around billions of dollars and so on. So I always ask myself, but who are the poor guys who remain there in Syria, in Iraq? So I think that it's not just let's open our gates, everything will solve. We need, it may sound utopian, but the only way out will be some kind of a global rearrangement of economic situation. If we keep the present situation of international neocolonial exploitation, the result will just be that poverty will explode in third world, there will be immigrant pressure, and then it may well happen what happened now in Sweden, in Italy, and so on, that there will be an, not authentic, but should I call it, lower class populism which will buy the fear of immigrants. It's in Italy, it's again, even in Sweden, and so on. I think I agree but that one should be more open towards immigrants, but it's not as simple as that. Immigrants are the result of certain failed policies. For example, it's United States and up to a point Europe, which caused immigration, you know, with one of the most stupid things were the final occupation of Iraq, the things in Syria and Libya. Without these, things would have been much more different. I'm just shocked at the stupidity of American politics in occupying Iraq. It looks that they were really so stupid that they thought, oh, Iraqi people will awaken, fine. No, they were so stupid. Instead of using Saddam's apparatus, his Ba'ath party, which were the only people qualified to rule, they excluded them, and of course they opened up the space for Islamic more fundamental. So that isn't this the irony that the American occupation, overthrowing of Saddam, basically opened up the space for Iran to more or less control the situation in Iraq. Another thing, in spite of all his horrors, Saddam was a secular nationalist, basically. He was never, as he flirted, but he was not a Muslim, which means that there was a whole educated middle class, women in position. They disappeared now. Or take Christianity. Saddam opportunistically left Christians alone. Even what was his name? Not Tariq Aziz, whatever. His foreign minister was Iraqi Christian. What happens as the result of American occupation of Iraq? More than half of the Christians left the country. So it's this total madness that American intervention made Iraq open to Iranian influence, much more fundamentalist, and so on and so on. In Libya, it's a similar crazy situation. It was bad under Gaddafi, but what we have now is probably even worse. It's a failed state, non-functioning state. It's, the situation is so messy, and what I really fear is, again, that if we, who try to be more radical left, buy this liberal game of, you know, let's protect liberal center and so on, that then the new populist right will succeed in canalizing in its direction more and more of this new rage. But don't misunderstand another thing. This is what happened already in England. The genius, sorry, I hate her, of Margaret Thatcher was that she got something. Arrogant Labour Party took it for granted that minorities are on our side. So they didn't, but Margaret Thatcher got it. There were many new rich Indians, not American native Indians, but Indians, the true ones, who were sick and tired of this automatic idea, oh, Labour Party, they will protect us. And the key to Margaret Thatcher's victory, and even now more and more, was that the newly rich Indians and even many of other Indians preferred Conservative Party. So, you know, this is the problem of the left today. Even the same happened in, I read detailed analysis by the guy who unfortunately died now, Mike Davis, about southern Texas, where there are many Mexican immigrants, and they discovered some of them are more opposed to immigration from Mexico than white people there. The situation is here very complex. There are so many traps here, so I'm more and more desperate. But I believe in miracles. No, not religious miracles, but look, take, like what you mentioned, Rojava. Take, although it failed, Syriza in Greece. Like, things explode. And, okay, let me stop. Maybe another one.
Yeah, let's just get one more, and
But-
one in the back, right there.
Yeah, and
One in the back, and then this
sorry
gentleman.
to say,
Yeah.
I don't mean it
Oh, do
in
we
a
have to go one more?
hypocritical
Just
way.
One more question? Yeah,
Okay,
woman in the
no,
back.
I will say something, sorry, immediately, something very hypocritical. I want at least one woman, so that then we can say hypocritically, it was not only men, there was one. Please.
Independent of that,
Please, you were here. No, but, okay, I didn't want, sorry, to suppress you.
yeah.
Yeah. I like this idea. Women are a 60 or 55% minority. But no, but that's a true logic, yes. Sorry, go on, please.
No, I mean, thank you. Thank you for the positive discrimination. No, I have a question about your, what I understand is kind of your theory of democracy, or what you're
Yeah?
coming to
Yeah.
create as a theory of democracy. So you mentioned certain kind of basic tokens of democracy and political theory, such
Yeah.
as the idea of law being something that we believe in, or we must believe in, but it is nevertheless conventional. You also mentioned the
Yeah.
idea of freedom as something that we must somehow recreate in our mind as a free choice, but ultimately there is a conflict inherent on, you know,
Yeah.
predestination, moral and ethical commands that we might carry or not. You also speak about authority and the figure of the father or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
mother as this figure that needs to pretend to be something different than what it actually is. So it seems as if you were posing that democracy is performative in the sense that we only embrace the democratic principles as long as we perform the democratic fundamentals, we perform the idea
Yeah.
of law, we perform the
Yeah.
idea of
Yeah.
freedom and so on. And this idea of democracy gives agency to people because you must believe that people are capable of acting ethically despite of the fact that ethics
Yeah.
might be a conventional
Yeah.
structure. But on the other hand, you warn us about the fear of ideologies or certain ideological principles that might co-opt certain people or minds and drag politics in another direction. And also, on the other hand, you bring about this idea of a leader that might be able to broaden our scope and kind of create a
Yeah.
different scenario. So I think that there is a tension, but you might explain it to us
I
between
think
these
that
two
this
things.
tension is in the thing itself. Look, I had a debate 15 years ago with some Venezuelans who tried to sell me this stuff. The only authentic democracy is local democracy, people organized in local communities. And then my instant obvious answer was, ha ha ha, with the big brother Chavez there. Basically, the state was there to, nonetheless, to provide, how should I put it, the general network, electricity and so on and so on. And for me, that's why, how should I put it, it's an open question for me. I have this deep distrust in local democracy. It is good, but it's not just a simple quantitative enlargement like, can you, to put it very simply, can you universalize it? Give me, and as for leaders, you know, many Marxists told me when I proposed this line that, no, a leader is a bourgeois idea, blah, blah, blah. Then I told them, give me one radical leftist regime without a leader, even a charismatic leader, from Mandela to Fidel Castro to Chavez and so on and so on. And my point is, what if it's wrong? My point is this one. You have this executive political space. And what is the only way to, it's very problematic notion, the only way to mobilize ordinary people at the level deeper than this, let's call it official institutional politicization, is through a charismatic leader. Now, I'm not saying that this leader should have actual power. I'm here extremely brutal, cynical, up to the point of saying maybe we need such leader, but at a certain point he should be liquidated. You know, like maybe you organize an accident or whatever. We should approach it in a creative way. I'm just saying that I don't believe in this anarchist dream that the authentic democracy is local, pre-representative, and then somehow magically this will grow up and embrace all of society, and so on and so on. So again, thanks very much. I fully accept your critical point that there is this tension. But again, it's a cheap Hegelian answer, I know. This tension is in the thing itself. For example, just again, I have this simple question. Are we aware that with immigration, mass movements, because of hunger, drought, and so on, it's clear that in next decades, tens of millions, even more people will move around. And there are only two options here. Either war, as it was done in the old times, one whole people move to another area and simply try to occupy it, blah, blah, blah. Either war or some kind of global cooperation, not global state. In the present state of things, the idea of a world state, and then what? World elections or what? Is a madness. It would open up incredible space of new corruption, totally non-transparent. But again, with all these problems, you know, parts of the world becoming non-fertile, dry, other parts, and so on, it's not even this. It's even that we have the mess in the same part. You know what was for me the truly apocalyptic scene? I was there to do a shot of that disgusting piece. Why disgusting? Because my stupid face is in it. Perverse guide to ideology in Valley of Death. But then I was shocked, you know, for me this was horrible, dry, but wasn't now a couple of months ago a mega flooding and the Valley of Death became a lake. It's horrible. So we'll have to get to used. This is for me, I spoke about it 2 days ago at Princeton, the deepest dangerous lesson that, you know, when we speak about global warming, we usually perceive it that there will be a new balance, just a little bit worse. Like, okay, temperature rise for 4 or 5 degrees, the level of sea will raise up, but then we will have a new stability. Now, what top scientists warn against is that, what if there will be no new stability? What if nature will enter into what it's called a true mathematical chaos? Simply, it's in a sense unnatural nature, because our spontaneous ideological notion of nature means we humans are crazy, hubris, creative. Nature means reliable, repeatable patterns. What if we lose this? And again, the only way I see is, and I cannot even imagine how, through some forms of cooperation. And when people tell me you're utopian, I give a very simple answer. Okay, I agree, maybe, even probably, but then we are lost. It's simple as that. Islands, feudal islands will maybe survive, you know, but the world will be an indescribable chaos.
Yeah. So.
This guy here is
one more, but I think we have to. Peter, what did we do? We have one more. Yeah, this gentleman was waiting this whole time, so we got to make it really quick, though. Okay.
Let's do. I like it. Sorry for obscenity. Let's do an intellectual quickie, if I may put it like this. Please.
Thanks.
So what I would say is, hearing your words, it feels like you're painting this global picture of movement that's pushing forward towards a tipping point, with talks of global movement, of the environmental degradation of the world, of all these conflicts.
Yeah.
My question is, you know, you talked about Ukraine and Russia, that conflict, that war, that invasion, and then you mentioned civil war. And my question is, do you think this tipping point will come in this century, or do you think there's a certain time, you know, that we can predict from it, you know?
Beautiful question. What I'm afraid is that there will not be, you know, one morning we awaken, the tipping point, that it will be that, you know, it's the same, sorry to repeat this internal example of mine, how do you fall in love? It always comes as a shock. You can be flirting, whatever, but all of a sudden you discover that you are already in love. I will not repeat myself here. I repeat even in all my talks here at this point. But what I want to say is that what if tipping point will be like this? Now we talk about, you know, I hate this rhetoric. We are 5 minutes to 12, the last moment, and all of a sudden we will discover, sorry guys, it's 5 minutes past 12. It will never be exactly noon. I awaken, some apocalyptic catastrophe, and so on and so on. Who knows? Maybe the tipping point is already here. Some serious people think this. I don't know enough. I even am not sure what to do. To be a radical ecologist today is very dangerous. What I reject and hate is this idea which is extremely anthropocentric. There is Mother Nature out there, peaceful, homeostatic rhythm. We humans screwed it up. First, sorry to repeat, I repeat it all the time here, my old joke, you know. What Mother Nature? Look, dinosaurs. Our main sources of energy are oil and coal. Can we even imagine what mega catastrophes must have happened on our Earth before humanity, times of humans, to have these resources? Our main source of energy are past catastrophes. So thanks very much. Mother Nature is a dirty, stupid bitch. It's not a good mother. So you know why this is important? It's absolutely catastrophic to relate to nature as some kind of a balanced system. We violated it, we should return to it, which means what? Here I respectfully disagree with Judith Butler, who said that we have to learn to discover that we are only one of the species on our Earth, and that we should behave more modestly. No. If we do this, everything is lost. Even when people say we have to keep temperatures beneath whatever, 1 to Celsius, this means we have to act like general managers of the world, precisely to save ourselves as one among the species. So the tragedy is that we don't know enough to work in a safe way. For example, you know that one of the big plans is, how do they call it? I forgot the name, that we should pump into the air large amounts of CO2, whatever, to protect us from the sun. But everybody knows this can be so risky. We don't know what other processes. So we are in a horrible situation. There is no natural balanced order to return to it. Nature is full of catastrophe. There is no balance. There is no pure objective scientific knowledge tell us what to do safely. At the same time, science is all we have. We have to rely on science. So we are in deep shit. Okay, sorry.
So we have to wrap up. Just as a, yeah.
Thank you. I will quickly put this